Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Send this message when they don't reply, watch them go crazy. Today, let's talk about connection, vulnerability, and the curious ways we navigate relationships in this digital age. We live in a time where our communication often happens through screens, and yet those interactions still hold the power to deeply impact us. We've all been there. You send a message, and the silence on the other end grows louder by the second. You start wondering, are they ignoring me? Did I say something wrong? Are they okay? It's as if that empty inbox becomes a mirror reflecting every insecurity we've ever had. Now, someone might suggest send this message. When they don't reply, watch them go crazy, but before you hit send, pause. Let's explore what this really means and why it resonates so deeply. Let's take a moment to think about silence, especially in the context of communication. Silence in a conversation can feel like a weighted gap that we instinctively feel the need to fill. When someone doesn't respond to a text or an email, that silence becomes not just empty space, it begins to take on meaning. It's as if the quiet moment starts to shape a narrative in our minds. And the story it tells is often one we didn't intend to write, but one we craft from our insecurities and fears. In the absence of words, we naturally fill the silence with our thoughts. Sometimes those thoughts are kind, thoughtful, or neutral. But more often than not, our minds create stories that reflect our deepest anxieties. We might wonder, did I say something wrong? Are they mad at me? Am I being ignored? Because I'm not important, those questions reveal the stories we write for ourselves. And more often than not, those stories are rooted in fear and self-doubt. Here's the thing, silence itself doesn't have inherent meaning. It's simply a lack of communication. But the longer we're left to sit with that silence, the more we begin to project meaning onto it. We take an innocuous moment, someone being busy, distracted, or simply needing space, and turn it into something personal. We turn it into a reflection of our worth, our value, or our likability. The longer the silence stretches, the more we may amplify the narrative we've created until it feels like a heavy, undeniable truth. Now, imagine for a moment what would happen if we could simply leave the silence where it is empty. What if, instead of writing a story that centers on our insecurities, we allowed that silence to remain neutral and free of judgment? The truth is, silence doesn't need to be filled. In fact, silence can be an opportunity for reflection, for growth, or for understanding. If we allow ourselves to sit with the silence without jumping to conclusions, we create space to respond to it thoughtfully rather than reactively. The silence doesn't need to signify that we're being rejected or that we're unworthy. It doesn't need to mean that we are being ignored or that we are invisible. Often the lack of a reply has nothing to do with us at all. The person on the other side might be caught up in their own struggles, their own busyness, or their own emotional processing. And yet here we are, writing stories in our minds, creating a narrative where the silence is a reflection of our flaws. We assume the worst because it's easier to believe that the silence is about us than to consider that it may have nothing to do with us at all. The reality is that our minds are powerful storytellers. But as much as our minds are capable of crafting elaborate, sometimes negative narratives, they are also capable of rewriting the story. We can choose to recognize that silence doesn't need to speak for us. We don't have to allow it to define our worth or dictate our emotions. Instead of looking for validation in every pause, we can look inward to find validation within ourselves. We can remind ourselves that the silence is just that silence. It doesn't require interpretation or meaning unless we assign it one. Moreover, we can choose to embrace the silence as an opportunity for introspection. When we feel that moment of uncertainty, we can ask ourselves, why does this silence bother me? What am I really seeking here? Is my sense of self-worth tied to someone else's response? These are uncomfortable questions, no doubt, but they are necessary ones. The answers we discover can help us separate our own insecurities from the realities of the situation. and in turn, help us understand that we don't need to write a negative story every time the silence creeps in. And let's not forget that silence can also be an invitation to give someone else the space they need. Perhaps the silence is a reflection of their own internal processes, and forcing a narrative of neglect or rejection onto them only adds to the pressure they may already be feeling. Just as we deserve the grace to navigate our lives without being constantly scrutinized, so do others. The silence can be as much about respecting someone else's space and time as it is about respecting our own. Silence is a neutral force. What we choose to do with it, how we choose to interpret it, is entirely up to us. Instead of letting the silence dictate a story of fear or adequacy, we can choose to embrace it as an opportunity to reflect, to grow, and to allow the other person the space they need. We can choose to rewrite the story, turning the silence from a reflection of our flaws into an opportunity for strength, resilience, and understanding. When we experience hurt, rejection, or betrayal, the instinctual response is often one of retaliation. We want to strike back, to make the other person feel the pain they've caused us, to restore the balance of power in some way. It's a reaction rooted in the need for validation, the desire for justice, or simply a desperate attempt to regain control in a situation where we feel powerless. The problem, however, is that retaliation never truly heals the wound. Instead, it often deepens it. When we retaliate, we're attempting to address the symptoms of our pain, our anger, frustration, or hurt feelings without addressing the deeper cause. At its core, retaliation is an expression of the desire to be heard, to make the other person understand how much they've impacted us. But the truth is, retaliation rarely leads to the understanding or resolution we seek. Instead, it keeps the cycle of pain going, reinforcing the very feelings of disconnection and anger that led to the hurt in the first place. Consider for a moment the cycle of retaliation in a relationship, whether it's a friendship, a family dynamic, or a romantic partnership. The act of retaliation usually begins with an injury. Someone says something hurtful, ignores us, or acts in a way that makes us feel unseen or unimportant. This initial injury creates a wound, a crack in the foundation of the relationship. When we retaliate, we're trying to protect ourselves from further hurt, but we're also contributing to the very thing that caused us pain, disconnection, mistrust, and misunderstanding. Instead of healing the wound, we pour salt into it, making it more difficult to move past the hurt. In these moments, our emotional response to pain can cloud our judgment. The desire to lash out can feel overwhelming, and we often convince ourselves that a retaliatory action will bring relief. We might think, if I do this, I'll feel better, or they'll understand how much they've hurt me. But what often happens is that in retaliating, we lose the opportunity for constructive conversation. Instead of addressing the issue head on, we allow the pain to fester, and we add more layers of resentment, guilt, and anger. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire and hoping it will go out. One of the core truths about retaliation is that it comes from a place of fear, fear of being vulnerable, fear of being hurt again, fear of being weak. When we strike back, we're trying to protect our ego, to shield ourselves from feeling exposed or vulnerable. But in doing so, we miss the chance to truly heal the wound. Vulnerability, ironically, is the true path to healing. When we choose not to retaliate, but to instead open ourselves up to honest communication, we take away the power of the injury. We acknowledge the pain, but we choose not to let it define us or the relationship. Retaliation also has a profound effect on the dynamics of any relationship. When we engage in retaliatory behavior, we are shifting the focus from healing to harm. We perpetuate the cycle of defensiveness and blame, making it more difficult for the other person to see our pain or empathize with us. Rather than creating an opportunity for understanding, we create a wall, a barrier between ourselves and the person who has hurt us. The very act of retaliation often turns us into adversaries rather than allies, further fragmenting the relationship and leaving both sides with unresolved hurt. But what if, instead of retaliating, we chose to express our pain more honestly? What if we reframe the situation, acknowledging our hurt without seeking revenge or retribution? Healing begins when we can articulate how we've been affected without letting our emotions hijack the conversation and turn it into a battle. This is how your actions made me feel instead of how dare you do that to me. In doing so, we allow ourselves to be vulnerable without letting the other person off the hook. We're not letting the hurt go unchecked. We're simply choosing to address it with empathy, clarity, and self-respect. Another key aspect of retaliation is that it often reflects our desire for control. When we're hurt, we feel powerless. Our sense of control has been disrupted, and retaliation feels like a way to regain it. But in truth, when we retaliate, we're handing over control to the other person. They've hurt us, and now we're allowing them to dictate our response. Our retaliation becomes just as reactive and damaging as their original action. True strength, on the other hand, lies in choosing how to respond rather than being swept away by the impulse to retaliate. It's in the decision to act with intention rather than react out of fear. Healing from a wound doesn't happen through retaliation, it happens through forgiveness and understanding. Now, forgiveness doesn't mean excusing the other person's actions or pretending that nothing happened. Forgiveness is about freeing ourselves from the grip of the hurt, releasing the hold that the injury has on our emotions and our sense of self. Forgiveness is the conscious decision to let go of resentment and anger, not for the other person's sake, but for our own. When we retaliate, we're keeping ourselves tethered to the pain, trapped in the cycle of hurt. But when we choose forgiveness, we set ourselves free. Retaliation also has a cost on our mental and emotional well-being. It takes energy to hold on to anger and resentment, and over time, that energy becomes draining. It consumes our thoughts, our feelings, and our time. The emotional weight of retaliation weighs us down, leaving us less able to move forward in our lives. The longer we stay stuck in that cycle, the harder it becomes to break free. But when we choose to heal, to move past the pain and not retaliate, we release that burden and create space for growth, understanding, and peace. Ultimately, the path to healing lies in breaking the cycle of retaliation. It lies in choosing vulnerability over defensiveness, honesty over manipulation, and forgiveness over retribution. Retaliation may offer temporary relief, but true healing comes from confronting the pain with courage, expressing our feelings without fear, and choosing to move forward, not with vengeance, but with the intention of creating a healthier, more connected future. In our fast-paced world, it's easy to get caught up in the desire to control situations, especially when it comes to our relationships. Control can feel like a way to ensure safety and certainty in an unpredictable world. But what if, instead of focusing on control, we shifted our perspective to something more profound: connection? While control may offer a sense of security, it often comes at the cost of the genuine, authentic connections that we truly crave. True connection is not about domination or manipulation. It's about creating a space where both parties feel seen, heard, and understood. We all have the need for control in some form. It's a natural human instinct. Whether it's controlling how we are perceived, how we are treated, or how we engage with others, there is an inherent desire to feel that we are the ones steering the ship. However, this drive for control can quickly spiral into unhealthy patterns. In relationships, control can manifest in subtle ways through the desire to change someone, to influence their decisions, or to dictate the terms of communication and interaction. This impulse to control often stems from fear of vulnerability, fear of being hurt, fear of losing love, or fear of rejection. The thought of being at the mercy of another person's actions or feelings feels too uncertain, so we attempt to take the reins. But here's the paradox: the more we try to control, the less likely we are to build true connection. Control creates barriers. It establishes power dynamics that push people away instead of drawing them closer. When we seek to control, we are often focused on our own needs, desires, or fears, rather than considering the needs and feelings of the other person. This creates an imbalance in the relationship where one person is trying to dominate the interaction and the other person is either resisting or retreating. The outcome is often resentment, frustration, or disconnection rather than the closeness and intimacy we yearn for. Connection, on the other hand, arises from mutual respect, understanding, and vulnerability. When we seek connection, we are focused on understanding the other person, embracing their experiences, emotions, and viewpoints rather than imposing our own. Connection is about sharing ourselves in a way that invites the other person to do the same. It's not about fixing or changing one another, but about holding space for each other's differences and recognizing the beauty in those differences. The goal is not to mold someone into our image of what they should be, but to meet them where they are, offering acceptance, compassion, and empathy. In relationships where we prioritize connection over control, we create an environment where both people can be their authentic selves without fear of judgment or manipulation. When we let go of the need to control, we embrace the uncertainty and unpredictability of human interaction. We trust that in giving others the freedom to be themselves, we also create the freedom for ourselves to be fully present, vulnerable, and open. Let's take a closer look at how control can manifest in different types of relationships. In romantic relationships, the desire for control often emerges through the desire to fix or save a partner. We may think, if only I could help them see things my way, if only I could make them realize what's best for them, then everything will be better. But the truth is, no amount of control will ever lead to a genuine connection. A healthy relationship is one where both people feel supported and loved as they are, not as they could potentially be if they conform to someone else's vision. In friendships, control can show up as manipulation or subtle pressure. We might try to influence our friends' choices, actions, or opinions in order to make ourselves feel more secure in the relationship. But true friendship is built on the foundation of mutual respect for each other's individuality. When we let go of the need to control our friends, we open the door to deeper trust, authenticity, and mutual understanding. In family dynamics, control often takes the form of expectations of how someone should behave, what they should achieve, or how they should live their lives. Parents may feel the need to control the path their children take, but the desire to control can often result in friction, rebellion, or resentment. Connection, however, is fostered when we support our loved ones without trying to dictate their choices. It's about providing guidance, offering unconditional love, and letting them find their own way in their own time. Moreover, seeking control often results in us prioritizing outcomes over the process of the relationship. We might be so focused on making sure that someone does something in a certain way or achieves a particular result that we lose sight of the journey of connecting with them. In those moments, we become so fixated on the destination, getting things done our way, that we fail to appreciate the nuances of the interaction itself. We miss the small moments of joy, laughter, and understanding that come from truly engaging with someone, not because of what they can give us, but because of who they are. Let's also consider the impact of control on our emotional well-being. When we seek to control others, we are often doing so out of a fear of uncertainty or a desire to avoid emotional pain. But the truth is, control breeds anxiety. When we try to manipulate the actions of others, we are constantly on edge, trying to predict their next move, hoping that we can keep things in our favor. This anxiety drains us emotionally and mentally. We become caught in a web of second-guessing, overthinking, and strategizing, all in the hopes of keeping everything within our grasp. But the more we try to control, the more disconnected we feel from the present moment and from the people around us. Connection, however, invites us to release that anxiety. It's about embracing the unknown, about trusting that the relationship will unfold as it is meant to, without our constant intervention. Connection is rooted in vulnerability, the willingness to let go of the need for perfection and control, and instead show up as we are, trusting that the other person will meet us in that space of openness. When we seek connection, we also give others the freedom to be who they are without fear of judgment. We create a space where they feel safe to express themselves, make mistakes, and grow. In turn, we also give ourselves permission to do the same. We stop hiding behind walls of control and defensiveness and allow ourselves to truly be seen. It's in this space of openness that authentic connection happens. Ultimately, seeking connection over control requires a shift in mindset. It asks us to let go of the illusion of certainty and security that control provides, and instead embrace the beauty of uncertainty and vulnerability that comes with genuine connection. It's not about fixing, changing, or manipulating. It's about accepting, understanding, and being fully present with the other person. The relationships that thrive are those where both parties feel safe to be themselves, where the need for control is replaced by the desire for authentic connection. Connection is what fulfills us as human beings. It's not about having power or dominance over others, but about meeting them with empathy, respect, and openness. When we let go of control, we invite deeper, more meaningful relationships into our lives, relationships built on trust, compassion, and shared humanity. Seeking connection, not control, is the path to true fulfillment and emotional freedom. In today's world of instant communication, it's easy to fall into the trap of measuring our value by the speed and frequency with which we receive replies. Whether it's a text, an email, or a message on social media, the lack of response can feel like a reflection of our worth. We start to question ourselves, did I say something wrong? Am I not important enough for them to respond? This tendency to tie our self-worth to external validation is a deeply ingrained habit, and it can affect how we perceive our place in the world. When someone doesn't reply, it can stir up feelings of rejection, loneliness, and doubt. The silence can feel personal, as if we've been overlooked, ignored, or disregarded. We might spiral into negative self-talk, asking ourselves if we are somehow unworthy of the time and attention of others. This is especially true in moments of vulnerability, when we've poured ourselves into a message, hoping for a connection, only to be met with radio silence. The lack of response feels like a rejection, not only of the message, but of us as individuals. But here's the truth: a delayed reply or no reply all says nothing about your intrinsic value. The absence of a message doesn't mean you are unworthy or insignificant. People's responses or lack thereof are often influenced by a myriad of factors that have nothing to do with who you are. They might be busy, distracted, or dealing with their own challenges. Their silence may not be a reflection of you at all. When we base our worth on the responses of others, we relinquish our power to external forces, allowing our sense of self to become vulnerable to things outside our control. The idea that our worth is contingent on a reply is an illusion that stems from seeking validation from others. We live in a culture where external approval is often seen as the ultimate measure of success or significance. Social media, for instance, encourages us to seek likes, comments, and shares as proof of our worth. Yet the reality is that no one else's opinion can determine who we truly are or what we are capable of. Your worth is not a reflection of how others respond to you. It is a reflection of your inherent humanity, your qualities, and the value you bring to the world. When we tie our self-worth to someone else's actions, whether it's a reply, a compliment, or a gesture of affection, we set ourselves up for disappointment and emotional turmoil. We give away our ability to define our own value, instead allowing others to shape how we feel about ourselves. This external validation is fleeting and unreliable. In fact, depending on it to affirm our worth can leave us feeling more empty, because the more we seek outside approval, the more we undermine our own sense of self. A quick reply or a positive comment may provide a temporary sense of gratification, but it doesn't last. Our worth should not fluctuate based on the whims of others or the timing of their responses. The key to overcoming this trap lies in developing a strong sense of internal validation. When we learn to value ourselves without relying on others' responses, we build resilience against the pain of silence. This means understanding that we are worthy of love, respect, and connection simply because we exist, not because we've earned it through a specific response or acknowledgement. When we acknowledge our own worth, regardless of external feedback, we free ourselves from the anxiety of waiting for validation. We realize that no one else's approval or disapproval can diminish who we are at our core. Additionally, by disconnecting our self-worth from the need for a reply, we begin to appreciate the richness of our relationships for what they are, rather than what they provide us in terms of validation. Relationships are not meant to be transactional, where we only feel valuable if we receive something in return. When we stop expecting others to validate us through their responses, we create room for authentic connection, where both parties can be themselves without the pressure of needing to meet certain expectations. It's important to remember that not every message requires an immediate reply. In conclusion, our worth is not determined by the replies we receive or the validation from others. It is inherent, unchanging, and deeply rooted in who we are as individuals. When we release the need for external affirmation, we empower ourselves to embrace self-compassion and authenticity. Instead of tying our value to the actions of others, we can find peace in knowing that our worth is not conditional. By seeking connection over control and understanding that silence does not define us, we free ourselves from the weight of waiting and embrace the fullness of our true selves. Thank you.